He has no idea. I'm pregnant, and it's definitely not his. My wife whispered in Spanish during our anniversary dinner while I sat across from her holding the gift I had bought after a year of secretly learning her language. She thought I understood nothing. I let her laugh with her sister, then answered in Spanish and slid my vasectomy report across the table. The room went silent before she even reached for the paper. My name is Mark. I'm 34. I work as a mechanical engineer. I've been married to Elena for 4 years. We met through a mutual friend. She was doing freelance graphic design at the time, sharp and easy to talk to, and I fell for her faster than was probably smart. Looking back, Elena grew up bilingual. Her parents, Roberto and Maria, came from a Spanish-speaking household. English is their second language, functional but not natural for them. Growing up in the Midwest, I'd never picked up any Spanish beyond the basics. Elena used to call me hopelessly monolingual. I laughed at that. I didn't think much of it at the time. Financially, I'm the primary earner. The house we live in is mine. I bought it before we got married. Deed has always been in my name. I pay the mortgage, the utilities, most household costs. Elena's design income covers her personal expenses and her credit card. At the time, I thought of it as a fair arrangement. She was building her client base. I was stable and earning well. It balanced, or I thought it did. I liked Roberto and Maria. Liked Roberto, especially quiet, solid, the kind of man who shows up early and brings tools. I wanted to be someone they respected. That mattered to me more than I probably let on. About a year ago, I decided to learn Spanish. A private project. I wanted to surprise Elena for our 5th anniversary, still a few months out at the time. I downloaded the apps, found a tutor who worked evenings, spent weekends with audio playing while I ran or drove. By month 8, I could follow most dinner conversations. By month 10, I was following all of them. There's one other thing I should mention. 18 months ago, I had a vasectomy. Elena and I had talked it through. Neither of us wanted children. We'd both been certain about that for years, and it felt like the right call. 6 months after the procedure, my doctor had me come in for a standard follow-up semen analysis. The result: azoospermia. 0 viable sperm count. The doctor said it was a formality, just confirmation the procedure had worked. I took a photo of the report on my phone, saved it to my camera roll, and more or less forgot it was there. I don't forget about it now. The changes started about 6 weeks before that dinner. Elena was quieter at breakfast, not cold, just absent. I found her in the bathroom 3 mornings in a row with the door pulled shut. The first time I asked if she was okay, she said it was something she ate. The second time, same answer, a little flatter. The third time, Mark, I'm fine. Can you not monitor my every move? I let it go. 2 Saturdays before the dinner, Sophia came over. That wasn't unusual. They'd always been close. They were on the living room couch, talking the way they always did when the conversation wasn't meant to include me. Fast, comfortable, relaxed in a way that assumed I wasn't following. I was in the kitchen. I didn't have to strain to hear anymore. Sophia asked, ¿Ya le dijiste? Have you told him yet? Elena. No. Todavía no. Not yet. I set down what I was holding, picked up 2 glasses of water, walked out, and asked if they needed anything. Elena switched to English the moment I came into the room. Sophia smiled. The subject changed to something about a friend's vacation plans. I went back to the kitchen and stood there for a while. I told myself it could be anything. A surprise they were planning for me. News about her parents. Something between the two of them that had nothing to do with me at all. I held on to those explanations for about 3 days. Then the quiet in the house stopped feeling like distance and started feeling like something more specific, the kind of stillness that forms when someone has already made a decision and is just working out the sequence. I sat down with Elena one more time. I said, as evenly as I could manage, that I could tell something was wrong and I wanted to understand what it was. She looked at me for a moment. You've always been too sensitive about things like this. It's exhausting to constantly manage your feelings, Mark. She didn't deny pulling away. She just made my noticing the problem. I stopped saying anything after that. I started paying very close attention instead. I went back through things I'd let myself ignore. Last Thanksgiving, the whole extended family at Roberto and Maria's place. At some point, Sophia had said something to Elena in Spanish while I was on the other side of the room. I'd caught maybe half of it at the time, not enough to be certain, so I'd filed it under probably nothing. Now I had enough to reconstruct it cleanly. Al menos es bueno para algo. At least he's good for something. They'd been talking about whether I'd offer to drive everyone home that night. I had offered. I always offered. Last March, Elena asked me to transfer $2,000 to her account for a family thing. I didn't ask what the family thing was. I'd learned not to ask, not from any single conversation, but from the accumulated experience of what happened when I did. I'd get something vague, then something slightly impatient, and by the end of it I'd feel like I'd been the difficult one for no particular reason. So I stopped being the difficult one. I transferred the money and said nothing. I thought about the times Sophia had called me El Americano, not warmly, not as a joke between people who like each other, just as a category. I thought about being talked over at Elena's family dinners, the standard explanation always some version of, "That's just how we are, Mark. It's not personal." I'd accepted that framing because I'd wanted to belong. I'd been trying to belong for 4 years. The thing about each of those moments is that in isolation, they're all explainable. One comment, one transfer, one nickname. But lined up in sequence, they stopped being isolated incidents and started being a structure, a functional, running structure with a very specific logic to it. I contributed, I didn't question, and whenever I got close to questioning, something redirected me back to my own sensitivity being the issue. Back to me being the problem. I wasn't the husband in that structure. I was the mechanism, the stable one, the reliable one. The one who paid the mortgage and volunteered to drive and sat at his own table smiling at the right moments and didn't follow the conversation. That week, I texted my attorney. I'd been referred to her by a colleague months earlier for something unrelated and had kept her contact in my phone. I told her I might need to talk soon. She said whenever I was ready. I didn't mention it to Elena. I just kept listening. A week before the dinner, Elena suggested having her parents over. She framed it as wanting more family time. It had been a while since everyone had been together at the house. I agreed. Part of me thought she might be building towards something, that with Roberto and Maria there, she might finally tell me what was actually going on. I held on to that possibility probably longer than I should have. I only understood what the dinner actually was after I played back the recording. I'd hear Sophia on it, relaxed, matter of fact, al menos sabrás cómo están las cosas con la casa. At least you'll know where things stand with the house. And Elena, he won't do anything. He's too nice. That's the problem with him. The dinner wasn't a gathering. It was an assessment. The night before Roberto and Maria were set to arrive, Roberto came over early to help me rearrange some furniture. We were making room for a larger table. While we were moving things around, he mentioned, in the casual, well-meaning way of someone who thinks they're being helpful, that Elena had told him I'd been under a lot of stress lately. Working too much, he said. It happens to everyone. He gave my shoulder a pat. He genuinely wasn't saying anything critical. He was being kind. I thanked him. I kept moving the furniture. But I heard what it actually was. Elena had already given her parents the story. She told it quietly, in advance, framed carefully. I was the stretched, too thin husband, prone to making things heavier than they needed to be. She was the patient one doing her best. Roberto hadn't passed that along as a warning from Elena. He'd passed it along as concern for me, which meant it had landed with him exactly the way she'd intended. She hadn't planted a lie. She'd planted a lens. And everyone who sat down at the table tomorrow evening would be looking through it. I thought about that while we carried chairs from the other room. I didn't correct it. I didn't say anything to Roberto about what I suspected, or what I had on my phone, or the conversation I'd caught from the kitchen 2 weekends earlier. I just made sure the table was set right. Then I went to the kitchen and started on the food. Roberto and Maria arrived at 6. Roberto brought wine, a red he was proud of, insisted on pouring it himself. The table was set. Elena seemed lighter than she'd been in weeks. Sophia was warm in the easy way she always was when things felt manageable. The house felt like a real family dinner was happening in it. The first hour was exactly that. Roberto had a long story about a neighbor's construction project that had somehow been ongoing for 2 years. Maria was talking about a cousin's wedding coming up in the fall. Elena and I sat close. At one point, she touched my arm when she laughed at something her father said. I let her. Then the dishes got cleared. The conversation drifted the way it always did in this family. Roberto shifted into Spanish, not to exclude me, just because it was the place he was most comfortable, where the words came easiest. Maria followed. Elena and Sophia picked it up naturally, the way you fall back into a current, you know. I sat at the table. I nodded. I smiled when it seemed appropriate. I followed every word. I heard Sophia settle back in her chair and say, Este idiota ni sabe lo que está pasando en su propia casa. This idiot doesn't even know what's happening in his own house. Elena, quieter, with a glance toward me that assumed nothing was registering. Shay. No. He never does. Sophia. Ya decidiste que vas a hacer? Have you decided what you're going to do? Elena. I just need a little more time. He doesn't know about the baby. Sophia. Y el padre? And the father? Elena. He's not in the picture. That's why. A small gesture, not dramatic, just a sweep of her hand at the room, the house, the table, the arrangement. Sophia nodded slowly. Well, at least the ATM is reliable. Both of them laughed, quietly. The way you laugh at something you've already made your peace with. My hand found my phone under the table. I'd had the recorder open since before they knocked on the door. I pressed record, set the phone face down against my leg, and refilled my water glass. 3 minutes and 40 seconds of clean audio. I excused myself, told them I was just getting more water from the kitchen, and went to the bathroom instead. Locked the door. Sat on the edge of the tub. Checked the recording. Clear. Both voices. Every word audible. I opened my photos and scrolled back 18 months until I found the image. The semen analysis report. Azoospermia. 0 viable sperm count. My name, my doctor's name, the date. I sat there for a minute and looked at that document. Then I looked at myself in the mirror. I thought about the year of Spanish lessons, the early morning sessions with the tutor, the hours of audio in the car during lunch, the weekends I'd almost given up and talked myself into one more week. I'd built the whole thing as a gift, my way of saying that her family was worth the effort, that she was worth the effort. The first full conversation I'd understood in that language had told me exactly what she thought I was. I splashed water on my face, walked back out, sat down at the table, looked at Maria. Would anyone like dessert? While the conversation kept going around me, my phone vibrated against my leg. A text from my attorney. Papers are ready whenever you give the word. I'd retained her 2 weeks earlier when the suspicion had become specific enough to have a shape. I hadn't known exactly what I was preparing for. I just wanted to be prepared. I sat there and thought through the options clearly. I could wait. Pull Elena aside later, just the two of us, handle it privately, keep it contained. On paper, that was the cleaner choice. But if I did that, Elena would control what her parents heard next. She'd already shaped their understanding once quietly, in advance, through Roberto's offhand comment the evening before. She'd do it again. She was practiced at it. Roberto and Maria had been sitting at this table for the original conversation. They hadn't been witnesses to anything, but they were the audience Elena had been performing for all evening. They were the people whose version of events mattered most in Elena's world. If the truth was going to land somewhere, it needed to land here. Not because I wanted a scene, because I was done being the only person in the room who didn't know what was actually happening in my own house. I finished my glass. Set it down. I looked at Roberto and spoke in Spanish for the first time at that table, in 4 years of dinners. Roberto, tengo algo que compartir con todos. I have something I'd like to share with everyone. The table went quiet. Roberto looked at me with something that wasn't quite surprise, more like attention, the kind you pay when the room shifts in a way you didn't expect. Maria looked over. Sophia's expression changed in a very small way, the way a face changes when it suddenly needs to track something carefully. Elena looked up from her glass. She was still smiling. She thought I was about to make a toast. I thanked Roberto and Maria for coming. I told them it meant a lot. My voice was steady, not because I was performing steadiness, just because there was nothing left to be afraid of. Then, I told them about the Spanish project. A full year, private, a tutor in the evenings, weekends with audio until it started to click. I'd wanted to surprise Elena on our 5th anniversary. Wanted to show her that her family was worth showing up for in their language. I wanted her to know I was trying, I said. I looked at her when I said it. Her smile had already started to change. Tonight turned out to be the right time to share it. I placed my phone on the table and pressed play. Nobody moved. The recording filled the room, clear audio, both voices, the ambient sound of the dinner table underneath it all. Roberto and Maria didn't need any translation. It was their language. Those were their daughters' voices, unguarded, saying things that had never been meant to reach this room. Este idiota ni sabe lo que está pasando en su propia casa. He doesn't know about the baby. At least the ATM is reliable. Sophia went completely still. Elena's color left her face, not all at once, but in stages, the way it happens when you're working through what options remain and finding fewer with each second. The recording ran to its end and stopped. The room held a silence that felt different from ordinary, quiet, heavier, more deliberate, the kind that forms when everyone present is waiting for something and it doesn't come. No one spoke. I said, I want to address the part about the baby. I opened my photos, found the report, held the phone up for a moment, then slid it gently across the table toward Roberto. I had a vasectomy before Elena and I were married. She knew about it. We discussed it. We were both in agreement. This is a semen analysis from 6 months after the procedure. The result is a zoospermia. 0 viable sperm count. Whatever Elena is carrying is not mine. Elena. Mark, you're taking all of this completely out of context. You don't understand what. I looked at her. What context would you like me to add? Elena. She didn't answer. Sophia. You recorded a private conversation without our consent. In my own home. I said it quietly. Which, as you were kind enough to discuss on the recording, is already in my name. The silence that followed that was a different kind of silence from the first one. Roberto hadn't spoken since the moment I pressed play. He wasn't looking at me, wasn't looking at the phone, wasn't looking at Sophia. He was looking at Elena. The way a parent looks at someone they've known their whole life and are suddenly trying to reconcile with what they've just heard. Maria's hands were flat on the table. She wasn't crying. She was very still. Roberto turned toward Elena. His voice was quiet. There was nothing in it that wasn't just the plain weight of the question. Es verdad? Is it true? Elena looked at him. She opened her mouth. She looked down at the table. She didn't say anything. That silence, the absence of a denial, the absence of an explanation, the complete absence of anything that could stand was the only answer anyone needed. Roberto didn't need the recording to believe it. He didn't need the medical report. He needed his daughter to say no. It's not true, and she couldn't. That's the moment the story ended. I stood up. I thanked Roberto and Maria, and I meant it in the way you mean something when it's the last time you'll say it. I looked at Elena. You'll hear from my attorney in the morning. I picked up my phone, walked to the front door. Sophia said something behind me, something that started with, "You can't just," and I was already there. I turned once. I looked at the room, the table I'd set, the food I'd cooked, the house I'd owned before any of this started, the family I'd spent 4 years trying to earn a place in. Then I looked at Elena. In Spanish, the way you say something that simply happens to be true. Aprendí el idioma. I learned the language. I closed the door. Elena called 6 times that night. I didn't answer. The next morning, I called my attorney and told her to file. Because the house had always been in my name, established legally before the marriage, nothing disputed, there was no property negotiation. Elena had 30 days to make other arrangements. She was back at her parents' house within 2 weeks. The story she started circulating that I'd set her up, that recording a private conversation was a violation, that I'd staged a scene at a family dinner for no reason didn't land the way she needed it to. A few mutual friends heard it. Most of them had been at dinners over the years, where I'd quietly covered the tab for Elena's extended family, had watched the dynamic run without ever naming it. The version of me in Elena's story didn't match the person they'd spent 4 years sitting across from. It didn't stick. Sophia went quiet. No public statements, no long messages, no defense mounted anywhere. She'd been Elena's most consistent ally as long as I'd known either of them. After that dinner, she didn't seem to have anything she was willing to say out loud. Roberto called me about 2 weeks after the filing. It was a short call. He wasn't offering an apology on Elena's behalf. I didn't expect that and wouldn't have wanted it. He just said, I should have paid more attention to what was going on. I told him honestly that I didn't think he could have known. We both said what needed to be said. That was the last time we spoke. He was a decent man. The situation just didn't leave a clean way forward for that relationship, and I think we both understood that. I never found out who the father was. I didn't try to. That part of the story belonged to Elena. In the weeks after filing, I started running again, something I'd quietly let go of over the last 2 years of the marriage. I got a therapist, which I should have done sooner. I cleared out the guest room and set it up the way I'd always wanted. A real desk, good lighting, shelves I could actually use. Small things. But they were mine. The Spanish app is still on my phone. A few weeks after the divorce was filed, I opened a new lesson set, intermediate going into advanced. I work through it in the evenings now. Sometimes on weekends. Not as a gift for someone else. Not because I'm watching for anything. Not as a trap. I just like it now. The language belongs to me. That's a strange thing to have gotten out of all of this. But it's true.